The Air Force and Navy had major conferences this past week. What did our reporters learn over the course of those events? Produced by Defense News and Military Times, this is the Early Bird Brief. Each morning, we bring you the defense and national security news of the day.
So that's been, again, kind of the overwhelming theme is this ongoing operation, this, I think it's fair to call it a proxy war at this point, and lessons the Navy is learning from these engagements.
We talked with Air Force Times' Rachel Cohen and Navy Times' Jeff Zulowitz to learn more. I'm your host, Jonathan Lehrfeld. Today is Tuesday, February 20th, 2024. Hey, Rachel. So you reported on the Air and Space Forces Association's Air Warfare Symposium that was in Colorado last week. What can you tell us about the new Integrated Capabilities Command?
Yeah, so there was a lot that was announced at this conference, and the new command is certainly one of those biggest pieces. One of the things that they really want to get after, as they look at what they need to do to be able to compete more effectively with China's military ambitions, is have a more holistic view of what they need for future capabilities. So right now, a lot of that discussion falls to the major commands, so the organizations that oversee, fighter, bomber, mobility, each of those different silos. And so creating a separate command will let them look more holistically at, where they're falling short, what capabilities they need for the next, 10, 20, however many years, and spend money more effectively so that they're not, duplicating efforts or overlooking, investments that could be beneficial.
And the service said it will replace the Air Education and Training Command with a new Airman Development Command. What info do you have on that?
Not a ton as of right now. So they're renaming it. It sounds like they want it to have, a bigger role over the training pipeline that it already governs. We're not entirely clear what that would look like yet. It sounds like, there's pieces of the training enterprise that fall under other commands that they want to move under the purview of, what will be Airman Development Command. It's kind of unclear right now, if that means, people's patches will kind of just be changing or, if there will be, new offices of people that are writing curriculum, things like that. So that's really still up in the air, but they think that it's going to make the training process over somebody's entire career a little smoother, is really the idea there.
Any news on the Space Force?
Yeah, there's, again, there's a lot of acquisition news on the Space Force side, just in terms of, they're also standing up their own Futures Command to do similar stuff in terms of more overarching force planning. They like the Air Force, want to make some changes to how their squadrons deploy. I mean, not a lot of people in the Space Force do deploy, but across the department, they want to. They're trying to make it a little more fluid in terms of you will know when you will deploy, who you're going to deploy with. It's not going to be as piecemeal as in the past when the Joint Force comes calling. And so that's, they're figuring out the details of that as well, how squadrons and deltas and, wings on the Air Force side, what's that actually going to mean, to look something more like, a carrier strike group in the Navy, so that you have a package that you can present to the Joint Force to say, oh, you want X, Y, and Z capabilities, like here's our nice, neat little package that we can give it to you in.
Jeff, you were at another conference this week, the West 2024 conference in San Diego, California. I know that Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Lisa Franchetti spoke at the event. What did she have to say, especially on some of the historic battles the Navy is facing?
Sure. The Navy's current engagements in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden were kind of the overarching theme, even as the conference kind of seeks to explore how to counter the so-called pacing threat of an ascendant China. And it's largely focused on the West Pacific in recent years, but world events have made the Red Sea stuff in the Gulf of Aden. Houthi battles, kind of the main focus this year. CNO Franchetti noted that Navy destroyers in the region had shot down 14 anti-ship ballistic missiles for the first time in history. And this conflict is believed to be the first one where anti-ship ballistic missiles, or ASBMs, have ever been fired kinetically or, with the intent to harm. So she noted that. The head of Naval Surface Forces, Vice Admiral Brendan McLean, noted the same on his own panel. Tuesday morning, Franchetti also confirmed that Navy warships had destroyed more than 70 drones and 7 Houthi cruise missiles in addition in recent months. So that's been, again, kind of the overwhelming theme, is this ongoing operation. This, I think it's fair to call it a proxy war at this point, and lessons the Navy is learning from these engagements. Leaders are pretty tight-lipped in terms of specifics, in terms of how these clashes are shaping doctrine and guidance, but they have admitted that in real time, the destroyers in the Red Sea are sending data back to commands in the States, and commands are getting right back to them in terms of how to optimally tune their radar to be kind of best prepared for when the Houthis start firing. And again, SWO boss Vice Admiral McLean noted that often these ships' crews have about 60 to 90 seconds to take action against the Houthi munitions. So it remains some really, really hot waters, and the overwhelming focus out west this year.
And U.S. Navy Secretary Carlos del Toro also had a pretty powerful message for government contractors. Can you bring listeners up to speed on his remarks?
Sure. West and some of these other military conferences, they have the big exhibitor floor. It's really the so-called military industrial complex made tangible and come to real life. And, there's sometimes the Navy brass will kind of inch around some challenges they're having with industry, but it seems like SecNav del Toro really kind of took this opportunity to pop off a little bit at industry. And he basically said, we're at a time of this really high-level global conflict, and we need these companies to put the country before their profit margins. He said, quote, "You can't be asking the American taxpayer to make even greater public investments while you continue, in some cases, to goose your stock prices through stock buybacks, deferring promised capital investments, and other accounting maneuvers that, to some, seem to prioritize stock prices that drive executive compensation rather than making the needed fundamental investments in the industrial base in your own companies at a time when our nation needs us to be at all-ahead flank," end quote. So he really said, we need you to sacrifice for the country just as, the men and women of the Navy are making their own sacrifices. So yeah, it was a forceful speech, and I would say one kind of out of the norm. It's also, as far as I can tell, kind of the first time that SecNav has really sounded off on this issue. But again, sometimes you see brass or senior civilians in the military take this tone. What it'll mean in the future obviously remains to be seen.
Anything else that stood out to you at this conference?
Sure. The head of U.S. Pacific Fleet, Admiral Samuel Paparo, who is slated to become the head of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command sometime this year, he issued a pretty grim warning in his keynote morning speech on Wednesday, kind of warning that the world is descending into chaos and once again framing the Navy and the Joint Force as kind of, the bulwark in terms of ensuring a continued American-led global order. He also announced that this spring the Navy will stand up a second unmanned surface vessel or drone squadron. The Navy set up its first surface drone squadron in 2022, and this squadron will once again kind of continue along that mission of pairing manned and unmanned capabilities together. He also noted that a lot of this stuff they have to keep pretty close to the vest just because adversaries like Russia and China are watching. So he said, if I'm doing my job, you won't know a lot about these so-called exquisite capabilities. And that was an interesting message as well. He's always a really good listen. He's a really intellectual dude and always kind of has something interesting to say. So he's always a must-watch at these things.
And anything else, Rachel, from the conference that you reported on that you think is worth highlighting?
Yeah, a couple, bits and pieces. They announced that they're going to, shrink the pool of collaborative combat aircraft vendors. CCA is the the AI-powered drone wingman program that they're pursuing. They're going to shrink the number of companies that they want to provide those, and multiple other, kind of program updates as well, just in terms of, new offices that they're adding, to get after cyber and communications and some of those, sort of sticky problems that they've been, trying to chip away at for ages. They're going to elevate the Air Force's cyber branch to report directly to Cybercom. So the goal there is to, give Cybercom, a more direct hand in how, Air Force cyber units, carry out offensive and defensive cyber missions every day, instead of making them go through a different chain of command that can dilute that effectiveness and that resourcing. And, on the people side, they are back on track for recruitment. Not something that you can say across the entire Pentagon, so they're pretty happy about that. Some of that is due to chipping away around the edges on things like, tattoos, on things like, body composition. But, they're also making strides to try and cut down on the backlog of people who are stuck in kind of the medical waiver process, with Genesis really slowing things down. They've brought people in to, really be focused on how do we move those people through the process? How do we make sure that they don't drop out as a result of just waiting too long? So they seem pretty optimistic about that right now.
That's it for us this morning. To get more of the top stories and breaking news, go to defensenews.com/EBB to subscribe to the Early Bird Brief newsletter. Please give us a like, rating, and a comment wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on social media @defense_news and @military_times. The Early Bird Brief is hosted by me, Jonathan Lerfeld, and produced by Zimone Z. Perez. If you liked our conversation with Jeff and Rachel, be sure to check out their work on NavyTimes.com, AirForceTimes.com, and across our other platforms. Our editor-in-chief is Mike Gruss. Have a great day.